Welcome back to another session of Captain's Counseling Corner. And this is video number 3. I'm going to put a card here so you can go back and watch the succession of videos, video 1 and video 2, kind of introducing and kind of leading up to what we are going to talk about today. And so in the last video, just as a reminder, we talked about definitions. And the reason we talked about definitions was without defining terms and not having definitions, it's really hard to come to some sort of agreement or foundation in which you can build the house. So what we are basically doing right now is I'm trying to set the foundation so that when we start building the house, if there is any kind of disagreement or misunderstanding, then it's going to be very easy to go back to the foundation and either fix the foundation or kind of deal with the foundation, but it won't be so that we misunderstand each other when it comes to definition of terms. So last video, we talked about the 5 misconceptions that people have when it comes to how they define friendship. And this was just the beginning. We could spend hours and hours talking about these misconceptions or different ideas, but I just wanted to throw out a few of them that I have personally come in contact with over the years of the way people define friendship for themselves when they are asked the question, how would you define friendship? So at the end of the video, I basically wanted you, and in the comment section, I wanted you to come up with your kind of definition as best you could of what a friend is. And then the second part of that was, what would you consider a close friend or a best friend? So what we're going to do today is we're going to build on that foundation, because at the end of the video, basically what I was trying to get across, or what I was trying to convince you to understand, was that over the years, I think, and I don't know when this started, but I believe really passionately that the idea of friendship, or what it means to be a friend, has been watered down. And it hasn't been watered down because people are just trying to not find friends. It's definitely something that people want. But in an age where we are becoming more independent and it's becoming more difficult to actually achieve what actual friendship is, the definition has been watered down and, in my opinion, changed to what we now call acquaintance. So an acquaintance is something that as soon as you hear it, you can kind of delineate between what a friend is and what an acquaintance is. So what I want to do today is I want to explore this idea in differentiation between acquaintance and levels of friendship. And then what I want to do is I want to talk about some disclaimers, because I think some people might be confused about what I'm actually trying to say when it comes to friendship versus acquaintance, as one being bad and one being good. And this is just not the case. So let's start with talking about acquaintance specifically and the levels of friendship. So I want to get into this next part by starting with story time. I was just going into my first year of my graduate program, and I had just graduated from my undergraduate program. And I went to the same school for my graduate program as I did for my undergraduate program, because there was a way to save time and money, because some of the classes from my undergraduate transferred into my graduate without having to take them again or do different classes. So I went to this school, and this school's name was Grace College and Theological Seminary. And as you can tell from the title, it was a religious school. It was basically a Bible school that had liberal arts kind of majors as well. And I went there because I was studying to be either a pastor of a church, and I was thinking about becoming a counselor for a church at some point. So at this school, it was required by the school that during the semester, 3 times a week, you had to attend a chapel service, is what they called it, which was basically church 1 hour during the week on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So if you went to chapel, it was usually around 9:30, 10 o'clock. I can't remember the exact time. And afterwards, after chapel in this kind of somewhat sizable room, people would either linger and kind of sit and talk for a while, especially if you didn't have class after this, or maybe some people would go to lunch together. And here I was in this chapel sitting with my friend Tim. Now, to quickly tell you about Tim, Tim was my best high school friend. We went to the same high school. I became Christian basically when I first met him. And we were friends during high school, but I was a year older than him. So I went to Grace a year before him. I had graduated high school and he still had his senior year. And then to my surprise, he and another friend from high school basically came to Grace as well. So my junior year of college, so my junior year of undergraduate, me and Tim, who was my best friend in high school, were actually living in the same room together in the same dorm room. So we got really close at that time. He had just started dating a girl during that semester, the last semester of it. But then my senior year, which would have been his junior year because he was a year younger, I went to a different dorm, he went to a different dorm, and he got more serious in his relationship, and life just kind of took us apart, even though we were in the same area. So I tell you this background because this was now my first year of graduate, which would have been his senior year. And we were both in chapel together, and this is where it all started for me, the ideas and differences of friendship and acquaintance. So I was sitting there thinking through this, and we got into a conversation after chapel had ended. And we were sitting there talking, there were a few people over here, and in front of us, in one row in front of us, was this girl named Christine. And Christine was a great, lovely girl. She was very nice, very bubbly personality. And I had maybe seen Christine, other than classes, I had maybe hung out with Christine twice. And it was always with other people. I was never alone with Christine. We were maybe in the same car going to church at a different area or going to have some fun, some activity. Only 2 times. Okay, so keep that in mind. So me and Tim are having this conversation about our friendship and kind of how our friendship had changed or was changing. And I basically said to him, it's interesting because we lived together and we were really close as friends, close friendship. But then, because he moved to a different place and I had moved to a different place, even though we were in the same area, we just didn't really spend that much time and our friendship was kind of growing apart. And so I basically said to him, right now I'd have to consider you not a friend. Like I would consider you more of an acquaintance. Here's where this word came up. And when I said this, all of a sudden, Christine must have been eavesdropping on our conversation because she turned around with this stunned look and she was like, Casey, and she was just kind of in disbelief that I would be saying this to Tim, who she knew our relationship and how long we had known each other. And she said, Casey, you don't consider Tim a friend? And then she made the comment, she said, if you don't consider him a friend, then what do you consider me? And I was like, oh shit. Because I was backed into a corner. I tried to get out of the corner. I was like, why do you want to know that? Why? It's not a big deal. But she persisted and she wanted to know what I thought. And I just basically told her the truth. I said, no, I wouldn't consider you a friend. And in my mind, this was just so obvious because I'd never even shared much of anything other than a few hangouts with a bunch of other people. And this definitely hurt her. You could tell when I said this, the response was not something that she wanted to hear and was not pleasant to hear. So this story is really the background and the backdrop that kind of helped me to start thinking about relationships and friendships in a different sort of way. So now we have these levels of acquaintances versus what a close friend should be. And when you think about it, even using the word or the adjective close friend, best friend, what you're doing is you're qualifying the levels between someone that is an acquaintance, and let's say the next level is a friend, someone you would call a friend, and then you go to someone who's a close friend, and then you go to someone who you would call your best friend. So what is it about these things that create these different levels? Obviously, there are some definitive ways that are making you in your mind, as well as me in my mind, to separate these different levels between acquaintance, friend, close friend, and best friend. So what I want to do is kind of deal with these ideas, or what's causing these breaks in definitions to add these different sorts of adjectives. And so I want to talk about that right now.
Stan, Grandma said she poked you and you haven't sent a poke back.
Dad, I didn't even want to do...
Stan, poke your grandma!
We've all heard the joke that, oh, we are Facebook friends. But I'm actually going to say something that might be a little controversial. I think that the friendship definition has changed so much into what is an acquaintance definition that essentially most people's friends are in actuality just like Facebook friends.
What?
When it comes to defining these different levels of friendship, if we were to start at the most general or the very bottom, we would start with probably acquaintance, which is very much connected to this idea of not really connected. There isn't such closeness there. It's very, very much pragmatic. And if we think about pragmatic, it's basically when I want to do something, I can do it with you. If I don't really want to do something, I don't. It's very beneficial to both people. And the quote that I showed you in the last video by Aristotle, which is everybody's friend is nobody's friend, this level of friendship is very much very easy to achieve. You don't really have to do any work so much sort of get it. It's just kind of like when you feel like it or when the other person feels like it, you get together and have a beer. There isn't really any sort of commitment there. I think this first category is basically how most people live in their life. Their friends, which I would call an acquaintance, is someone that they give very minimal effort and commitment to. In our world today, which I talked about in the last video, there's so many things to distract us, whether it's video games, whether it's work, whether it's YouTube videos, whether it's a pandemic. There's lots of things that make it that much more difficult to actually commit and give more of an effort to the relationship. I would say, let's just throw out a number, 80% of the friends that people have in their life are really non-committal, very low-grade effort, and that's about as far as it goes. Now, this can also be when you get together, you talk about your families on the surface level. Maybe you talk about sports. Maybe you talk about things that are just kind of normal on the surface. And it's not until you really go through the fire together that you move to the next level, which is what a lot of people would call close friends. So close friends are above friends or acquaintances. And you get into this idea that with a close friend, maybe there's already some history in your past. You went through some trials and tribulations, and you've gotten past those, and you've had some history together, and you make a valiant effort to actually call each other once a week. I think in some cases people make it once a month. And especially if you're not living in the same area, it makes it that much harder. But this is where people, when they talk to each other, have that comfort level because they have the history or they have these circumstances where they've known each other for a long time, and they talk about maybe some deeper things, maybe some struggles that they're going through. And there's some sort of emotional connection that goes beyond just the normal kind of acquaintances, friends that you hang out with. There's effort given in these situations to try to get to a closer relationship. This, to me, would be level 2, what we call close friends.
You are my people, and we'll talk about it now.
The last category is what people would call best friends. And best friends is so far beyond the normal definition. These are the people that we give this title to only if there is a lot of commitment there. Ironically, and I will talk about this later in different videos, but when you ask a romantic couple, when you specifically women, but when you ask a romantic couple, what kind of person do you want to marry? I bet you already know what the answer is going to be.
Today, we are going to talk about marrying your best friend.
It's always, I want to marry somebody who's my best friend. So there's this category where we put people that are beyond other people. Now, why do people get into this category? There's all sorts of reasons. But the thing that is true about this category of people that we allow to be our best friends are people that we are really loyal to, and this is people that we are highly committed to, and we put forth much more effort typically in these kinds of relationships. Or we should. If you do not do that, then you are not going to be able to call this person a best friend by definition. The word best is kind of like more than the others. There, once again, you're qualifying the differences between these. And what I want to show you, or what I wanted to do by talking about this, is not that I necessarily agree with these different terms of how you characterize friendships, but I wanted to point them out because when you go from acquaintance, friend definition, to close friend, to best friend, there's obviously a hierarchy that's being built. And what is consistent in the midst of all that hierarchy is that there is a level of commitment, there is a level of trust, there is a level of devotion to those relationships the higher you go up in the hierarchy.
That's the essence of a best friend. Someone you want to cry with, someone you want to be emotionally raw with.
And although we have this hierarchy, I want to submit to you that, again, most of the population who calls their friends or best friends actually don't have this level of commitment with each other that is required to call somebody a friend or a best friend.
No way. No way.
I want to finish with some disclaimers, because what I want to make very, very clear that I think has gotten lost, or maybe has been lost in the midst of all of this, is that I'm not shitting on acquaintance friendships. I'm not shitting on the friends that you may have in your life that really aren't deep, connected relationship friendships. I think that these kinds of relationships are completely necessary in life. You need to have these kind of non-committed, pragmatic relationships in your life. One of the misconceptions, especially in marriage, and even I think in best friends or friends, close friends, is this idea that is unspoken. And it's the idea that one person should be able to fulfill all of my needs. So if I marry, you'll hear this a lot in the age of romance, where love definition has been changed from commitment to emotion, is that these expectations that are built up in this kind of relationship marriage is that somehow this person is going to fulfill all of my needs. And then when it doesn't, or when they don't, that's when a relationship goes awry. So it's very, very important to understand that not one person, a best friend or a close friend or even two or three, can really meet all of your needs, but that's not what it's about. So there is room and there is necessity for all levels of friendships in your life. So then what the hell am I complaining about? Why am I talking about this? Well, let me make this very clear. What I was trying to show by going through each of these different definitions in the hierarchy that most people would agree to, whether you have thought about it deeply or not, most people have this hierarchy of friendship in their mind. Acquaintance, close friend, then best friend, and then ultimately marriage seems to be sort of like the coupling of best friend with romance. And when you have this hierarchy, what that's basically doing is showing that there are levels of friendship, which I agree to. And so when it comes to these levels of friendship, one thing was consistent. And what was consistent is that the higher you go up on the scale, or the higher you go in the levels of friendship, the more commitment is needed, the more effort is needed, and the harder it will be to achieve. So anything in life that is really difficult to get, that's by definition not easy to get, is something you really have to put work into. If I want to be a bodybuilder, or if I want to be the best guitar player in the world, it doesn't come easy. It's something that I have to put a lot of time into, a lot of effort, blood, sweat, and tears. Why would relationships be any different? It's easy to have acquaintance friends. I have acquaintance friends. There are several people I can think of and call right now that this person right here, if I want to go out and have a good time and just drink and shoot the shit and meet some people and those kinds of things, I have two specific people in mind that I can think of right now, Korean and foreigner. And then I have another person that I can think of right now that they're not very fun. They're not really the most enjoyable type of personality. But if I'm in the mood to talk deep political things and I want to kind of go down that route for a couple of hours, that's who I'm going to call. There are a bunch of different relationships you can have that are very easy and that don't require much effort at all. And pretty much everybody has those kinds of friends. And this is what I'm challenging you and hopefully challenging you with, is to rethink about this, because that's the low-lying fruit. That is the low-lying fruit. We all have those types of people that we can contact. But I'm going to challenge that those are not really friends. Those are not, however you want to label it, close friends or best friends. And what's rare and what I'm pushing for is, just like in everything else, it's great to have these low-lying fruit friends that don't require much effort and I don't go very deep in. But what about the other side of the scale? Friends that are really, really my best friend, that I'm really, really close to, that I can share everything I need to share with, that I can cry with, and that I can have multiple connections of depth with them. Not just, this is the person I'm going to go out and shoot the shit with. This is the person. But you can shoot the shit with them. You can talk deep with them. You can trust them with anything in your life. You can really go deep, 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 deep with them. All of us are inundated with acquaintance friends. And it tends to be the Facebook friends or the acquaintance friends is really where it stops. Because to get to the other side of where we have deep, committed, emotional depth friendships is something that we really have to work for, blood, sweat, and tears, that most people, though they would love to have that kind of relationship, that kind of friendship, are just not willing to put forth the effort that requires you to have that sort of relationship. And then on top of that, this kind of relationship is not something that is ever achieved or arrived at. It's not something that once you've got that relationship, it's always there. It's something that you constantly have to fight for, something you constantly have to work to keep going. This is why most people don't do it, and this is why most people, in my opinion, don't have these kinds of relationships. However, when you sacrifice because it's easy to sacrifice and get distracted with the low-lying fruit, you also miss the incredible fulfillment that a relationship like that brings. I have always used the analogy when I'm teaching my Korean students English. And the analogy that I have always talked about is when they are in conversation, when they're trying to have conversation in a different language, what is more important than their English skill is their conversation skill. And when it comes to their conversation skill, surprisingly, most people are actually not good at conversation. It seems like it would be very easy to just have a conversation, but most people are not good at conversation. So when I'm describing to my Korean students, I use this analogy, and that is there are first level questions and then there are second level questions. First level questions are those questions that always have an answer. And a first level question is, what's your name? What time is it? Did you eat lunch? Where is your house? What is the address? All of these questions have answers to them. But then we have what's called second level questions. And second level questions never or almost never have an answer. They have beliefs. You can have beliefs about what the answer is, but there is no way to tell what the answer actually is. An example of a second level question would be, what happens when you die? You can have a belief about what happens when you die, but you certainly don't know the answer to that yet. We don't know the answer to that yet. Another example question of second level would be, are there aliens on other planets? Now, we have beliefs that there are aliens on other planets, but we don't know if there are aliens on other planets. We just have beliefs. So these are what's called second level questions. In life, in philosophy, they talked about, many philosophers have talked about the distinction between these first and second level questions. First level questions are necessary. You need to ask first level questions. But so are second level questions. Second level questions are necessary to get to the deeper truths of life and humanity. Second level questions are important to ponder and think about, to get to know yourself, to get to know other people, and ultimately connect on a deeper level. So what I'm trying to tell you is basically what friendship has become is just like first level questions. And guess what? First level questions we ask every day, all the time. It's like breathing air. It's very, very simple. And that's great. Not shitting on that. We need to ask first level questions a lot. What I am challenging all of us to do, especially men, because when it comes to friendships and closeness in relationship, there's a particular problem and obstacle that men really cannot get past.
What am I afraid of? So what the fuck am I afraid of?
And we'll talk about that maybe later in different videos. But when it comes to relationships, you gotta get to the second level questions. And what I'm proposing to you in all of this, and why we don't have friends, is because just like acquaintance, we only stay in the first level most of the time. Because it's the low-lying fruit, it's easy, it doesn't challenge us, it's not really hard to get. But to get to the truth, to ask the second level questions is hard. It takes a lot of hard work, especially if you start debating somebody in these kinds of second level questions. They bother you, they annoy you, they expose something that you believe in that's absolutely false or wrong, and then you have to deal with yourself and the fact that you were wrong and you don't know what the hell you're talking about. That is hard work. This is why most people in all of their relationships and conversations tend to never ask second level questions, because it's hard work. Also, this is why most people don't have friends.
Maybe we could be each other's soulmates.
So now that we have talked about the disclaimers, we have laid the terms and the foundations of what I really believe and what I'm really proposing, I think it's time that we move on to start talking about how we get to the next level. How do we get into these second level relationships? How do we start to develop these close, deeper level connections? Because ultimately, I believe this is what I want, and I believe this is what most people want. We are just scared to go there, or we maybe don't know exactly if other people are willing to go there. But if this is the path, if this is the kind of things you want to shoot for in your life, which I believe, again, during situations like this in a pandemic, or when people get on their deathbed, this is when they start to regret not having those deeper second level friendships and relationships. So I would like to start talking about what I believe are the three necessary, and we're going to take them step by the three. What are the three necessary requirements that you must do, that I must do in order to achieve these kinds of relationships that I ultimately believe we want, but we're necessarily not pushing to get because we are distracted. So in the coming videos, we are going to talk about that. Maybe you guys in the comments below can guess, what are those three? Do you have any idea? The tattoo would give you an idea, which is why I put it on my body. So what we are going to do is really start to define now what and how we can get these relationships in our lives. I hope that this was, even though a long video and probably a lot of explanation, I hope that this has sparked your interest as well to continue on to the next video, because I really believe this is life. So as always, like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next session.